I never thought I'd speak of this out loud. Not because I'm afraid. Fear. I've already known fear. What I carry now is something else entirely. It's a memory that withers from within, sitting there, waiting for a crack to slip through. We fool ourselves into thinking we'll forget, but some things, they stick. They cling to your bones like morning frost that refuses to melt, even when the sun climbs high. Back then, I was already a churchman, settled down, head screwed on straight. But what happened that night showed me that there's a kind of pain that pierces right through even those who think they've armored themselves with faith. His name was Bruno, but I called him my boy. He wasn't my son, but he might as well have been. He was my aunt's child, and I was one of the ones who stayed on him the most. About studying, about dropping those crooked friendships, about becoming a man of integrity. When he turned 18, I gave him the bicycle he'd dreamed about for so long. I scraped together my first month's construction pay to buy it. It was a grey Callaway, used but good. And he cried so hard he clapped his hands together. The following year, well, that's when it happened. They said it was on his way back from the plaza after some stupid argument with two acquaintances, but nothing was ever proven. He took 4 stab wounds, clean, without warning. And the most painful part, they didn't take anything from him. No watch, no phone, no wallet. So people started whispering, talk of envy. Someone's ex had a hand in this. He was mixed up with the wrong crowd. But what hurt me most was seeing Aunt Doralitz go silent, as if she'd aged 20 years in a single breath. And even so, she was the one who organized everything, even without money, even without strength. The neighborhood folks gathered to help. They brought flowers, chairs, water, sweetbread, and set everything up in the parish hall there in the center of the neighborhood, where the light always flickers and the ceiling fan spins, as if it's exhausted from living. I arrived before everyone else. I wanted to help arrange things, but when I got there, everything was already done. The only different thing was what my aunt did. When they brought him in, she approached slowly with a small white cloth in her hand. Inside it was a 25-cent coin, one of those old iron ones. She stood there for a while, just looking. Then she placed the coin in the boy's mouth. No crying, no screaming. She just placed it there. I heard when she said softly, "If he comes here, you let me know, my son." I pretended not to hear. Pretended it was just grief, just a mother's thing, but that coin stayed there and nobody dared touch it. People started arriving slowly. There was a moment around 9 at night when it looked like Sunday Mass. The hall was packed, occupied chairs, children running around, people bringing pots of coffee as if that would solve anything. But the atmosphere was strange. It was as if everyone there knew someone was missing. It wasn't just the boy who had departed. It was the truth that hadn't appeared. Because everyone speculated, everyone whispered, but nobody said anything for certain. Have you ever felt that a space can hold more than bodies, that silence can weigh more than words, that sometimes the absence of truth is heavier than any confession could ever be? Nace, think about the times you've stood in a room full of people, yet felt utterly alone, knowing that everyone around you carried the same unspoken knowledge, the same terrible secret that nobody had the courage to name. That's what filled that hall that night. So night fell, and with it came that feeling of vigil. It seemed like nobody wanted to be the first to leave. Some people had been standing for hours, others sat with lost gazes. The ceiling fans pushed hot air around, and the flowers were already starting to attract small flies. At one point, I heard an older man comment in a hushed whisper, "Seems like the body's waiting for something." And it wasn't a lie, because there, in that suffocating heat, everyone started noticing the coin. Some whispered while looking at it, others avoided it. And there were those who asked if it was some kind of promise. I just said it was the mother's thing, and nobody questioned it. 2 in the morning, the hall was emptier, but not silent. There was a low hum, people sleeping on their feet, children in arms. Aunt Doralice didn't blink. The large candle trembled in the corner. The shadows on the walls seemed alive, breathing. That's when Iago appeared. He came in slowly, kind of sideways, looking at the ground. I'd known him since he was little. He was Bruno's cousin too, but those two were inseparable. Best friends, really. They had that thing of trading shirts, wearing the same chain. When he entered, some looked, others turned away, but nobody said anything. He came straight to where my aunt was, knelt down, asked permission, said he was in bad shape, that he couldn't come earlier, that he was in shock. She looked at him the way you look at a wall. Then she nodded, letting him approach. Share in the comments an affirmation that begins with, I recognize that, because sometimes speaking our truth out loud is the only way to free ourselves from the weight we've been carrying in silence. When we acknowledge what lives inside us, we give others permission to do the same, and that's how healing begins, not in hiding, but in the sacred act of confession. I remember to this day the sound of the fans, the plastic chairs creaking as someone shifted in the back. Iago approached, extended his hand, touched his fingers to the wood on the side, looked at Bruno's face, and then it happened. First came a tear, except it wasn't a tear, it was too thick, too dark. Then more came. It flowed from both eyes slowly, as if his eyes were weeping something that had been stored inside. At first, nobody understood, but it only took a second. Someone screamed and everything collapsed. When that substance flowed from his eyes, nobody had any more doubt. It wasn't sweat or tears. It was thick. It was dark. It was impossible to fake. I smelled it before I saw it clearly. That hot rust smell that sticks in your throat. The candle in the corner flickered as if someone had passed by it. But nobody moved. His mother fell to her knees and screamed like someone who's certain of something they never wanted to believe. She pointed her finger, but it trembled so much it seemed to apologize for pointing. It was him, she said, just that, and the entire hall froze. Iago trembled. He didn't back away, didn't run, just stood there as if he already knew that at some point this was going to happen. I went to him, grabbed him by the arm, but didn't squeeze. There was no anger, just an exhaustion impossible to explain. The kind you feel when you've stayed awake all night waiting for rain to fall, and when it finally does, it's not relief. It's silence. He sat down, head low, and started talking. First it came tangled, disconnected words, then it began aligning the way weight aligns when we stop denying it exists. He said it wasn't supposed to go that far, that it was supposed to be just a scare, a fight, a shove. He said Bruno had gotten an expensive pair of sneakers from his stepfather, one of those brand name ones that glow in the dark, that make that clean sole sound on the school floor. He said he'd never had a pair like that he'd always wanted them, that he never had the courage to ask, that he started envying them without meaning to. But the worst part wasn't the sneakers. It was the girl. The one Iago had liked since 7th grade, the one who laughed at his jokes but never went beyond that. She showed up one day in the middle of the plaza, looked at Bruno with those sneakers on his feet, and said he looked handsome. That was it. Just that. He said he didn't think, he just went. Waited for the right moment, called Bruno aside, started arguing over something random, and when he realized it was already done. Already on the ground. Then he ran, hid his clothes, threw away the knife, but couldn't throw away what stayed inside. He didn't even try to go to the burial. He said he spent time wandering the city aimlessly, his clothes still sweaty, lay down on a bench at the bus station, vomited 3 times. When someone called, saying everyone was at the parish hall, that the hall was full, that Bruno's mother was still standing, he understood he had to go, that either he showed up or this thing would keep living inside him until it killed him too. I remember everything in slow motion. The coin slipping from his mouth after that substance flowed from his eyes, the sound of it hitting the floor, the silence that came after, a silence that didn't ask for explanation, only respect. Nobody touched the coin. I swept the hall myself when everything was over and left it there in a corner where the candle had dripped. My aunt's house still has that coin. Nobody threw it away, nobody cleaned it up. It sits in a small pot on top of a dresser covered with a crocheted cloth. When I went to visit months later, I asked why she still kept it. She only answered, because some things only come out when they're touched. And I understood. Because to this day, every time I think of Bruno, I don't think of the scream or the blood or the candle or the coin. I think of his eyes. Those eyes that saw before we did what we only had the courage to admit when it was already too late. Eyes that spoke without speaking, because there's a truth that doesn't need a mouth to come out. It sent word at 7 in the evening. She said the farewell would only begin at midnight. Said it just like that, in her way. He departed on the wrong day. Only at midnight will he accept it. And she hung up. Nobody understood, but nobody contradicted her either. Marlon's mother wasn't one for conversation. Since the time the boy gave her trouble as a child, she was the type to handle things with a look, firm, dry. People in the neighborhood said she'd already seen too much in life. And those who've seen too much end up knowing when a day is wrong, when the fabric of time itself has been torn and sewn back crooked. I was the only one who drank with him regularly, not a childhood friend, not a work buddy. Just that, really. We'd run into each other at the bar, laugh, talk nonsense. I knew about his life only as far as he'd let me. Never entered his house, never saw his room, but I was the only one who stayed by his side when the rest started drifting away. The news of his passing arrived on a Thursday morning. They said it was one of those stops nobody expects. He was only 35, went silent in a way that doesn't match someone who always made noise, who always filled a room with his presence, his laughter, his restless energy that never quite settled. The chapel where they set up the viewing was isolated. One of those with tile floors that creak in the middle and thick walls that hold heat like an oven. In the rural zone, about 4 miles from town. It was supposed to have started in the afternoon, but everything stayed set up, closed until almost 11:30 at night. I remember the image clearly. Wooden benches sweating moisture, a candle burning near the window already tilted to one side, the wall outlet making noise as if hissing, spitting electricity into the dense air. There were maybe 8 people at most there in the beginning, and nobody spoke loudly. Voices seemed to hit the walls and bounce back, hollow and strange. At midnight exactly, she arrived, dressed all in black, thick fabric despite the heat of the early morning. That's when the air changed. I'm not talking about wind. I'm talking about pressure. That sensation that comes in your chest without reason, when your head goes soft and your breathing fails. And you know somewhere deep in your primitive brain that something fundamental has shifted in the world around you. What would happen if at this moment you realized that time itself could reject what we try to force upon it, that the universe has its own schedule and our human rituals are just desperate attempts to impose order on chaos? Consider how many times we've insisted on controlling the uncontrollable, demanding that loss follow our timetable, that grief obey our calendar. That's when I realized it. This night wasn't just different, it was wrong. She knelt near the closed casket, but didn't touch it. Stayed there for about 5 minutes, praying low. Didn't even seem like she had a son in there. It was more like she was waiting for an answer, negotiating with something we couldn't see. After that, the sequence began. First the light. The wire in the outlet crackled. The bulb's light turned yellow, oscillated and settled into an almost imperceptible tremor. Then the smell. There were too many flowers in that room. It should have been sweet, but the smell turned into something else. Not flowers, not candle wax. It was old sweat. I can't explain it better than that. It was as if the walls were breathing and sweating themselves, as if the building had become a living organism trying to expel something it couldn't digest. The body was sweating too. The casket was closed, but you could see it. You could feel it. The varnish was running. The cloth on the side turned dark, wet and heavy. One of Marlon's uncles stood up and said it would be good to open it again to see if there was a problem, but nobody could open it. The lid seemed sealed, not locked, not with a padlock, but sealed as if the wood had fused with itself. One tried with a screwdriver, another pulled from the corner. The hinge only groaned but didn't give. His mother didn't say anything, just stood and asked, "Don't force it. He's not ready yet." After 2 in the morning, the heat became different. It didn't increase, it just stopped moving. The air didn't pass anymore. No wind, no crickets, no mosquitoes. The sound of night disappeared completely. And when you notice silence, it's because it's become a thing unto itself. Silence can also blow, can press against you like a living force. And it blew. The chapel walls started dripping. I swear by what remains of my life. The brick, the stone, they sweated. Drops descended as if someone had thrown water from inside, but it was just time walking wrong, stumbling over itself in confusion. Leave in the comments your reflection beginning with, "I commit to..." Because when we witness the impossible, when we see reality bend in ways our minds can't quite grasp, we must decide what we'll carry forward and what we'll release. Sharing that commitment makes it real, transforms private conviction into sacred promise. 1 candle fell per hour, always on the opposite side from where she sat. 1 at 2, another at 3, 1 more at 4. It would fall, extinguish itself, and nobody lit it again. The generator failed 3 times. On the 3rd time, it didn't come back. We were left with what we had: crooked candles, hot walls, and a desire to leave that nobody had the courage to admit. I stayed because I stayed. It wasn't out of friendship. It was because if I left, it seemed like something would go with me, would follow me out into the world and claim me as its own. The mother didn't cry, didn't speak, didn't eat, didn't move. Just stayed there looking at the lid, as if expecting it to lift, not by miracle, but by stubbornness, by sheer force of maternal will that refuses to accept what cannot be changed. Almost 6 in the morning, the gravedigger appeared with a helper. It was already arranged. She didn't want a mass, didn't want prayers, just wanted him taken at the end of night when day hadn't yet been born, in that liminal space between darkness and light where spirits still wander freely. The part nobody forgets was this: she wouldn't let them put the body in the car. Said she would walk with him to the field. The field was nearby, about 400 meters. Packed earth, pasture on one side, old house on the other. And she walked beside the casket with her hand on it, as if guiding it, as if that touch was the only thing keeping him tethered to this world just a little longer. We followed. Nobody spoke. The hole was already open, dark and waiting like a mouth. The gravedigger positioned the ropes, but when it came time to lower it, nothing held. The rope would slide but wouldn't pull. One moment it seemed light. The next it weighed like stone, as if gravity itself couldn't decide what to do with it. The 2 men tried again and again, switched positions, sweated until their shirts clung to their backs, and the mother just watched with those eyes that had stopped expecting anything from this world. That's when one of them said softly but loud enough to hear, "The bottom seems like it won't accept him." The wood started groaning, and then it went in a crooked way, a bit too fast. He descended. But then came the part I never told anyone. Not my wife, not the priest, not even my mirror, until a certain time ago. When we started moving away from the grave, everyone had a shadow on the ground. Shadow from the candle, shadow from the sun beginning to rise. Even his mother's was there, all except one. There was a shadow that had no body. It was beside me, stretched out, long, kind of twisted, darker than the morning should have allowed. And when I moved, It didn't. I couldn't understand if it was mine, but it didn't move, didn't follow my steps. I walked and it stayed until the corner of the field's wall covered it, and I didn't want to look anymore. I went straight home, didn't go to the coffee gathering the people made afterward. Threw my clothes away, washed my head with coconut soap, locked the window with a padlock, and never spoke his name again. But some things don't accept endings, refuse to be neatly filed away in the cabinet of memory where we store our dead. To this day, from time to time, I get up to drink water in the early morning hours, and when I pass through the living room, I see a second silhouette in the window's reflection. It's not a human form, not a woman's figure, not wind. It's a delay, as if something is still waiting, lingering in that space between moments where time forgot to move forward. Waiting for what? I don't know. Maybe it wasn't him who didn't want to descend into that earth. Maybe it was something else that came along with him. Something that saw in me the only one who didn't run, who stayed when wisdom would have dictated flight. They say midnight is the dead point of the day, the fulcrum where yesterday and tomorrow balance precariously. But that was the only time I saw time actually stop, saw the machinery of the universe jam and grind to a halt. And the worst part is, I don't know if it ever started moving again, or if I'm still standing in that field, frozen in that impossible moment. I didn't even know funeral homes did this kind of thing. Discovered it when I called to arrange everything, and the woman told me that the standard package included a live stream link. I found it curious. She spoke as if it were normal, like coffee service or a flower wreath. According to her, it was for relatives who lived far away, people who couldn't come but wanted to watch. Watch. That was the word that bothered me, as if it were an event, a performance. Something you could consume from the comfort of your screen, but I accepted. At the moment, I didn't think much about it. It was just a click on the email contract and done. The camera would already be there, turned on, recording everything. My father never liked tributes. In fact, he didn't like being noticed at all. A retired teacher, one of those with a low voice, measured steps, always made a point of living as if he were transparent, as if taking up space was somehow an imposition on the world. But after my mother passed away, about 6 years ago, the relationship between us became strange, awkward, like wearing shoes on the wrong feet. We talked more out of obligation than desire. Short messages, formal gatherings on mandatory dates, the bare minimum required to maintain the fiction of family. And when he departed, sleeping alone in his room, it fell to me to resolve everything. My brother is younger, lives in Belém, couldn't make it in time. So it was up to me to organize everything in the most correct way possible. Maybe that was it. A way to compensate for all the distance, all the silence, all the years of existing in parallel lines that never quite touched. Have you considered how we try to make amends with the dead in ways we never could with the living? How we dress up absence with ceremony, hoping ritual can bridge what conversation never did? Think about the elaborate performances we stage for those who can no longer witness them. The apologies we whisper to ears that will never hear. The love we finally express when it's far too late to matter. On the scheduled day, I arrived a little before the ceremony. The room was clean, silent, with that smell of air conditioning and expensive flowers that money can buy, but authenticity cannot. The space was new, with cushioned armchairs, indirect lighting, and a camera on a tripod right in the center of the room. The image was being transmitted to a private YouTube channel from the funeral home itself, with a link and password. The woman assured me that nobody besides the invited guests could see. This wasn't exactly true. In the first half hour, there weren't many people present. I think there were 9, maybe 10 people there physically, scattered across the room like islands. But in the lower corner of the transmission screen appeared the viewer count. 64, more than I expected. More than the number of people who still remembered my father in my head, more than I thought his quiet life had touched. I started noticing the names that appeared in the chat. some known, an aunt from Campinas, a cousin of my mother's. But there was one name that made me uncomfortable, Anonymous 768, not because of the name itself, but because he sent a candle emoji before the transmission even started. Like, before the camera was officially turned on, the emoji was already there. As if he knew, as if he'd been waiting for a very long time, counting down the hours until this moment. Write in the comments an intention that starts with, "I decide." Because in those moments, when we witness something that unsettles our understanding of reality, we must choose what we'll do with that knowledge. Deciding out loud transforms uncertainty into commitment, and sharing that decision with others gives us the strength to follow through when doubt creeps in like fog. I sat near the wall, watching everything from a distance. The room was almost too perfect. Nobody cried loudly, nobody spoke much. Just that sound of feet shifting on carpets, people moving from armchair to armchair, and the camera always on, always watching, its red light blinking like a sleepless eye, recording everything. On the screen, I started noticing small comments. "The light is strange." He blinked. "Look at the corner of his mouth." At the time, nothing seemed strange to me. A wake is a place for sensitive people. Everyone sees what they want to see, projects their grief onto the stillness before them. But the comments started repeating. "He's moving people." The eye opened. "Did you guys see that too?" I looked at my father's face from where I was sitting. Nothing. Inert face, immobile, the way it had always been in death. No breath, no tremor, nothing that suggested life remained in that shell of flesh and bone. But on the camera, it seemed different. I only noticed the contrast when I approached to adjust the flower arrangement. It was as if his face was looking at the lens, even with eyes closed. That was the sensation. The camera captured a type of attention that didn't exist in the real environment, as if what was being transmitted wasn't exactly what we were seeing live, as if the technology was revealing something our human eyes couldn't perceive, or our minds refused to acknowledge. And that's when someone sent in the chat, "There's something in the mouth." That phrase froze me solid. It was as if they were speaking directly to me, because I immediately remembered when I helped dress him. Me and the funeral home employee. I saw the face. I saw the mouth. There was nothing there. Nothing. But the camera showed something else. The lower corner of the lip seemed slightly twisted, as if hiding something, concealing some secret that wanted desperately to be revealed. And at minute 48 of the transmission, it was possible to see, in replay afterward, that the skin beneath the tongue gave a slight tremor, a flutter that shouldn't have been possible in a body that had stopped breathing days ago. It was at that point that I asked them to shut down the live stream. I spoke with the manager. She found it strange, but complied, though her eyes told me she thought I was overreacting, being dramatic in my grief. But it was already too late. Someone had downloaded the video, and it started circulating, spreading through the internet like a virus, multiplying in places I could never reach, never control. The messages started 2 days later. "Did your father leave any message? Did you see minute 48? He looked at me, I swear." A woman I don't know sent me an email. Said she'd never met my father but watched the transmission out of curiosity. The link ended up in a Facebook group, passed from stranger to stranger like some digital ghost story. She said that since then she'd had nightmares with his image looking directly at her, and it wasn't a metaphor, it was literally that at a certain moment in the video, my father's eye opens, not slowly, not like a spasm, opens completely and remains open long enough to be seen, long enough to terrify, long enough to burn itself into the viewer's memory like a brand. Only in the recording, never live. The people who were there in the room didn't see anything. Not me, not the funeral home employee, not the 9 or 10 people scattered across those cushioned chairs. But in the live stream, there was proof, with frames, with timestamps, with screenshots. And there was more. Some people who watched the video before it was deleted from the channel said the eye wasn't just open, but focused on the lens, on the center of the image, as if he'd finally found his audience after a lifetime of transparency. The funeral home deleted the video from the official channel, said it was for violating sensitive content guidelines, hiding behind corporate policy and legal jargon. I demanded explanations. They claimed that since it was private content, they had no control over reports. But the downloads were already circulating in groups, spreading like wildfire, and the mouth part became more evident. You could see with zoom that something really was there. A strange volume inside, small, cylindrical, like a rolled paper waiting to be discovered, demanding to be read. That's when I convinced my brother to accept the exhumation. He thought I was going crazy, losing my grip on reality, but he agreed anyway, maybe because he heard something in my voice that scared him more than the idea of disturbing the dead. 3 weeks later, they opened the casket and found it. Inside my father's mouth, carefully stored, there was a folded paper wrapped in thin plastic, written by hand with a failing pen, the ink splotchy and uneven. 3 lines total. I'm leaving everything to her. Forgive me. Signed, R. The registry office confirmed it afterward. The will that was archived left everything to me. My brother signed without questioning, said he already expected it, had made his peace with being the younger one, the distant one, the one who didn't organize the funeral. But that wasn't what dismantled me, what destroyed me. It was the fact that it had been public. What would it mean to you if your most private moment, your final confession, became entertainment for strangers who never knew your name, never heard your voice, never understood the weight you carried? Consider how we've turned grief into content, death into clicks, how the most sacred passages of human existence now play out on screens for audiences who consume suffering the way they consume everything else. Hungrily, mindlessly, scrolling to the next tragedy before they've even processed the last. What was supposed to be intimate, silent, almost bureaucratic, became spectacle. The messages, the screenshots, the video edits with zoom and background music. People who never knew my father now swore he had something to say, insisted they'd received his message personally. And they said he chose the camera, that he waited until the red light was on, until he had an audience worthy of his final performance. Sometimes I believe that. Sometimes late at night when I can't sleep, I think maybe he did. Today, I don't watch videos halfway through anymore, neither live nor recorded, because I know that somewhere on the internet, even deleted, that image still exists. The one of his eye open, steady, doing what he never managed in life. Looking back, meeting gazes, demanding to be seen, and I finally understood. He didn't want silence. He just wanted to be heard. And he was by hundreds of people, all at the same time, with his face still and his eye wide open, screaming without a sound, confessing without words, leaving his mark on strangers who will carry his image forever. Share in the comments your personal truth, beginning with, I discover that. Because when we uncover what's been hidden, when we finally see what was always there waiting to be revealed, we transform not just ourselves, but everyone who witnesses our recognition. That discovery spoken aloud becomes a beacon for others still searching in the darkness. I didn't want to be there. If I'm being completely honest, I shouldn't even have been. It had been 4 years since I'd seen that family. 4 years since I left the house with just one bag and never went back, not even to get the rest of my things, my books, my tools, the small pieces of a life I'd built and then abandoned. That man, my ex's father, if you can even call him a father, he emptied me from the inside every time he looked at me, drained something essential with those eyes that measured and found wanting. But my daughter called me in the afternoon, and I never knew how to say no to her, never learned that particular form of self-protection. She said just one sentence, Do this for me, Dad. Just show up. The farewell was scheduled in a garage there in the North Zone. Rolling gate open, plastic chairs scattered without thought. That white tarp covering the floor so it wouldn't stain, as if stains were the worst thing that could happen in a place like that. Field flowers in excess, trying to disguise the cheap disinfectant that burned your nose. That chemical smell that clings to the back of your throat. Nothing solemn, nothing beautiful. It was a room adapted in a hurry, set up for a quick wake for someone who, well, not everyone wanted to keep vigil for. Not everyone mourned with genuine grief. Rubens himself had been found alone inside the apartment. It had already been a few days, according to what they said, and by protocol, the casket was closed, sealed tight. They said it was better that way, out of respect. I understood it was more because of the state of the body, really, because of what time and solitude do to flesh when no one's watching. I sat on the last bench wearing a mask, even though nobody else wore them anymore. The heat was absurd, suffocating. The fluorescent light seemed to pulse on the ceiling like a dying heartbeat. Church people passed by, prayed with rehearsed words, people whose names I couldn't remember anymore, faces that blurred together in the haze of disconnection. The family was all there with closed faces, pretending they were united, performing the ritual of familial solidarity that death demands. Nobody knew what that man had done to his own daughter. Nobody knew I almost raised my hand to him once and stopped, not out of fear, but shame. I didn't want to be the ungrateful one, the husband who couldn't handle his father-in-law. I endured everything. I was called soft, weak. He said I was a good driver but a soft man, spitting the word like an insult, like softness was the worst thing a man could be. Once he offered me a shot in front of my daughter, just to laugh at my face when I refused, to show everyone how weak I was, how I couldn't even take a drink like a real man. But there was one day when he was half drunk, when he sat down next to me and asked forgiveness for everything, cried, said he envied me because I was calm and he wasn't, said he ruined everything he touched, that his hands were poison, that he watched himself destroy and couldn't stop. The next day, he pretended it never happened, and that stayed with me for a long time, festering like a wound that won't close. Back in the garage, the ceremony continued. Some sang, others cried as if they knew who he was, as if they'd seen past the performance to the broken thing underneath. I just watched. Oh, how many times have you carried someone else's confession, held their moment of truth like a secret treasure, only to watch them erase it the next morning as if vulnerability were a crime they'd committed in darkness? Think about all the apologies you've received that were immediately retracted, all the honesty that evaporated with sobriety, all the moments when someone showed you their real face and then spent years denying you ever saw it. Until suddenly the light flickered, then went out completely. Dense silence, the kind that presses against your eardrums. Someone messed with the circuit breaker outside. Minutes later, everything came back, and that's when they noticed the casket lid, the one that should have been sealed, was ajar. Just a hand's width, but it was enough. A woman screamed. An old man stood up, went over there as if to close it, to restore order to this disrupted ritual. But when he looked inside, he took 2 steps back, his face gone pale. I went too. I don't know what I expected to see. I just know that what I saw wasn't what they expected. The face there wasn't deformed. That wasn't it. But the expression was exactly the same as the day he asked me for forgiveness. It wasn't the usual hard face, not the mockery. It was a mixture of shame and contained tears, something raw and real that his living face rarely allowed. There was a small red thread right there on the back of the ear, a detail only I remembered because it only happened that day. He fell drunk on the floor, hit his head, and bled a little there. The body shouldn't have been like this, but it was. Nobody there could understand what that meant, only me. And in that instant, it crossed my mind that maybe that was just for me. As if he'd waited for the last minute, as if he wanted to show me that he knew what he'd done, that even in death, he couldn't escape the accounting. I didn't say anything, just left before the funeral home people came back to seal it. Didn't wait for the lowering. On the way, I kept trying to forget, but I couldn't. And it was only the next day that I understood that it hadn't finished yet. That death doesn't always close the conversation the way we think it will. The next morning, I was sure my head had invented everything, that face wasn't quite what I thought, that the cut could have been anything. The mind plays tricks, especially when you're carrying old resentment like a stone in your pocket. But then early on, there was something in front of the gate, an envelope without a name, without a return address, just folded in the middle, heavy with intention. It was one of those film photos already half faded, me and him on the plaza bench after my daughter's school festival. I remember that day well. It was the only day he treated me like a person, like someone worthy of basic human dignity. It had been the only day he thanked me for anything. His daughter had gotten sick, and I was the one who carried her in my arms, running without thinking about anything else. He stayed behind trembling, and on the way back he looked at me differently, said thank you with a thread of voice. Never repeated it again, let that moment sink back into the silence he preferred. Behind the photo there was a phrase written by hand, trembling letters, from a tired old man. I was a mistake, you weren't. Leave your testimony in the comments with the words, I have learned that. Because sometimes the lessons that cost us the most are the ones we need to share the most. When we speak what we've learned through pain, we give others permission to learn without suffering the same way, to understand without walking the same broken path. At that moment, my legs went soft. I sat on the garage floor, unable to let go of the photo. I didn't cry immediately. I got angry, actually. What right did he have to do this now? After everything, after years looking at me as if I was worthless, now he came wanting this kind of thing. Forgiveness, peace. It's easy to ask when you don't have to deal with the response anymore, when death has given you the final word. I spent that whole day quiet, no TV, no cell phone, not talking to anyone, just the photo in my hand. Each time I looked, the memory came back more vivid. His face, the expression, the way that body seemed to want to speak without opening its mouth. It wasn't a haunting, it was worse. It was the type of thing that enters inside and lodges itself where nobody else can see, in that deep place where we keep the hurts we can't heal. Because deep down, I knew he wasn't asking forgiveness from me. He was asking it for himself. Maybe it was the only moment he managed to admit who he was, and he did it the only way he still could. But I didn't know what to do with that, with this gift I never asked for, this burden disguised as absolution. I kept the photo inside the Bible my mother gave me when I quit drinking, the same one I keep closed but never throw away, the one that sits on my shelf like a promise I'm not sure I can keep. I spent a few days trying to forget. It worked more or less. In that way things work when you're lying to yourself. Until one night, very late, my daughter sent a message. Just 3 words. Thank you for going. I read that several times and started thinking that maybe, just maybe, that presence, that face, that phrase weren't about me at all. Maybe he knew his time was up and that if anyone had to move forward in peace, it was me. Maybe he left that like someone leaves a piece of silence inside you to see if you'll fill it with something better, something that doesn't taste like bitterness and regret. But I don't know if I managed to do that, if I had the strength to transform his final gift into anything resembling grace. To this day, I haven't told anyone what I saw. Not my daughter, not my therapist, not the pastor who lives on the back street. Because deep down, I still don't know if I believe it or if I want to believe it. If accepting it as real means accepting too many other impossible things. Some people think everything ends when the light goes out, that death is a clean boundary, a final period at the end of a sentence. But I know there are things that continue there with eyes closed, waiting for the right moment to say what they didn't have courage to say in life, to confess what pride kept locked behind teeth and silence. We think time heals, but there's pain that time only hides, buries it deeper where we think we can't see it, but where it continues growing like roots in darkness. And what haunts me most wasn't the face, wasn't the envelope, wasn't the photo. It was the fact that I forgave him. In the exact moment I saw that, felt something loosen in my chest, like a knot coming undone. And then I regretted it the next minute, snatched that forgiveness back like a gift I'd given too hastily. Maybe he really did ask for forgiveness, but I still don't know if I accepted it. Maybe I never will. Maybe some doors, once closed, stay closed forever, no matter how hard the dead knock. And that's why sometimes in the middle of the night, when the whole house is silent and even the street sounds have died away, I close my eyes and see that face. Not his usual face, but the face only I saw. The one that asked forgiveness without sound, without gesture, only with the weight of someone who knows it's already too late, that the moment for reconciliation passed years ago on an ordinary afternoon that neither of us recognized as our last chance. I almost didn't go. That's the truth. If it depended only on me, I would have stayed home, avoided the whole mess, the discomfort, the weight of family obligation pressing down like a hand on my shoulder. Nobody would have blamed me after everything, after 8 years of silence thick enough to suffocate. But then Mom called with that voice she uses when she's holding the world on her back, when she's asking for something she knows costs too much, but has to ask anyway. She said, "Go there, even if it's just to stay outside." And that's what I did. Stayed outside for a while, leaning against the peeling wall of my aunt's house. People passed and pretended not to see. Some even saw, but just gave that wave that says they don't know what to say, that there are no words adequate for this particular flavor of family tragedy. Because what do you say to the brother who stayed outside the family for 8 years, who became the ghost at every gathering, the name people stopped saying out loud? The room was full. The sofa pushed against the wall, that white cloth draped over the casket, an ancient fan spinning in the corner and cooling nothing, just pushing the heavy air from one side of the room to the other. His wife passed by me as if I were invisible. I don't blame her. If it were the other way around, I'd also pretend I didn't know who she was, would look straight through her like she was made of glass. I entered with my head down, stayed in a corner of the room as if my place wasn't there, except it was and it wasn't, simultaneously belonging and not belonging in that space thick with grief and performance. The last time we saw each other, we came to blows, me and Kike. An argument over nonsense, inheritance, pride, a word said wrong, the type of thing that doesn't seem like it will last, but does. It lasts and kills everything that still existed between us, murders the childhood we shared, the secrets we kept, the bond we thought was unbreakable. He got colder over time, stopped responding to messages. I didn't insist either. I was left with the reputation of someone who fought with family and never showed up again. But nobody knew what he said that day. Nobody knew what he hid. What really happened in that room when it was just the two of us and our anger. And if you were told that the person you cut out of your life is trying to reach you from beyond death itself, that forgiveness is waiting on the other side of fear, would you have the courage to listen? Adbrudi, reflect on all the bridges we burn, thinking we have time to rebuild them later, all the final words we speak, not knowing they'll actually be final, all the relationships we let die because we're too proud to resuscitate them. I spent about 20 minutes standing there, pretending to pray, moving my lips in approximation of devotion when my cell phone vibrated. I looked at the screen. It wasn't a call, wasn't a message. It just started playing on its own. An audio file, At first, I thought it was a mistake, something from my daughter or the work group chat, but in the first second the voice started, I knew. It was him. Kike's voice, firm, calm, as if he'd recorded it hidden in some corner just for me, saved it for this exact moment. If you're hearing this, then it's because there wasn't time. I froze, tried to pause, tried to lower the volume. The button didn't respond. The screen was lit, but nothing worked, only the voice pushing through the phone's speaker like it had its own will, its own determination. He started telling an old memory from when we were kids and went fishing secretly behind the school. We used a bamboo rod the neighbor had thrown away, salvaged it like treasure. He told that story, talked about the mosquitoes, the scare we got when we thought we'd be caught, the way we ran laughing through the tall grass with our pathetic catch. He said, that was our secret, wasn't it? I loved you even when I became a beast to you. I froze. Only we knew about that. Nobody else. Not Mom, not my ex-wife, nobody. And I heard that in the middle of the room with his body right there in front of me, people talking low, my aunt passing coffee around, and me with my cell phone locked in my hand, listening to my brother ask me for forgiveness after he'd already left. After death had taken away his chance to say this to my face. I lied to our mother about that day. That was the part that broke me most, shattered something I didn't know was still intact. I was the one who started screaming. I was the one who invented that you threatened me. You left thinking you were guilty, and I let you because I was angry, because I was losing control. His words didn't come as pretty regret. There was no poetry, just truth. And truth sometimes is what hurts most, cuts deepest, because it can't be argued with or explained away. If you have courage, forgive me. If you don't, I understand. But now you know. The audio was ending, but before it finished, there came a noise like a breath, a whisper of wind where no wind should be. And then another voice. Not his, a deeper voice, more profound, from somewhere else entirely. And it said just two words. He knows. The audio stopped. The room was the same, people entering and leaving, conducting the business of grief. Nobody had heard that except me. Nobody else received that message from whatever place sends messages through dead men's phones. I looked at my phone. There was nothing. No save file, no history, no sent items. Not on WhatsApp, not in the voice recorder, not on Telegram. Nothing. As if the universe had delivered this message and then erased all evidence of its passage. I left the room, went to the back of the yard, near the water tank, breathed deeply, sat on the doorstep and stayed there, not knowing what to do. If I should be angry, if I should cry, if I should go back, if any response was adequate to what had just happened. After everything ended, I went back to Mom's house. She received me in silence, looked at me like looking at a stranger who used to be a son, someone she recognizes but doesn't quite know anymore. But after a while, as she arranged some papers with those careful movements of the elderly, I asked, was he recording things? She stopped, breathed deeply, said that in recent months he'd been kind of different, that he talked to her about fear of leaving with things stuck in his throat, that he said he needed to find a way not to take everything with him into whatever comes next. Before I left, she went to the cupboard and took out an old coffee tin, the kind people save for decades without quite knowing why. Inside was a bunch of old papers, keys nobody remembered anymore, and a small toy fishing rod. At the base, scratched with a knife, was the name Julio. I'd never told anyone that we hid that rod after the fishing day, that we swore we'd never tell, because it was our secret place, our proof that we existed as brothers before we became enemies. He kept it for 30 years, and I kept rage, cultivated it like a garden, watered it with resentment until it grew tall and blocked out the sun. Write in the comments a declaration that begins with, I accept that. Because acceptance is the hardest work we do, harder than love, harder than forgiveness. When we accept what we've lost, what we've wasted, what we can never recover, we finally make space for something new to grow in that scorched earth. When I said goodbye to my mother, I didn't promise to return. I don't know if I will. I just know that that day I thought I was going there just to fulfill an obligation, just to say I went, just to please Mom and check a box marked dutiful son. But I went to hear what only I could hear, to receive a message addressed to an audience of one. And now I'm the only one who knows. The last memory wasn't mine, it was his. But now it's only mine. This burden he passed to me like an inheritance I never asked for, but can't refuse, can't return, can't give away. I carry it alone. I didn't go because I wanted to. That's where it starts. It wasn't friendship of the kind where you go out together, share confidences over drinks, lean on each other when times get hard. It was more like companionship, the kind built on proximity and routine rather than genuine connection. He lived on the 3rd floor of the building I take care of here in Osasco. His name was Edmure, retired, 63 if I'm not mistaken. We played dominoes sometimes, exchanged ideas about football, television, light stuff that skimmed the surface of real conversation, never diving deeper than pleasantries and predictions about next week's match. He didn't receive visitors, didn't talk about family, and only asked me for 2 things. Don't touch what was his. Respect the boundaries he'd drawn around his small life. And if one day he went silent, as he put it, don't let them put him just anywhere. Don't let him end up forgotten in some unmarked corner of a municipal cemetery. But nobody appeared for him when the time came. No relatives, no close neighbors, nothing, just absence where family should have been. It was the funeral home that called me, because I was the only contact they had, the only name in his phone that wasn't a delivery service or a doctor's office. They asked if I could sign the release papers and accompany the farewell, handle the administrative details of death that someone has to handle. I was off that day. Said yes, more out of obligation than desire. Arrived at the ceremony room in the middle of the afternoon. It was one of those smaller ones in an old building, weak air conditioning that barely stirred the stale air, bluish tube lighting that made everyone look already half dead. And that smell you can't describe, only feel. That particular combination of flowers and formaldehyde and grief that coats the back of your throat. And then came the first wrong thing, the first crack in reality's facade. The casket where they'd placed him was big, disproportionate, like someone had ordered the wrong size and nobody bothered to exchange it. It seemed like it was meant for 2 people. I thought it was my imagination at first, my eyes playing tricks in that strange light. But after I approached, I confirmed it. There was too much space left over. Edmure was small, 5'3" at most, thin as a rail, barely took up any room when he was alive, and even less now. What was there was a deep casket, long, spacious. Another person could fit in there easily. But nobody commented. Nobody seemed to notice or care. The funeral home attendant was there with a clipboard, checking names mechanically. The woman who came to bring flowers was an old neighbor who didn't even know he'd passed. Showed up thinking she was visiting someone else. And nobody said anything about the size. Only I noticed, or only I faced it as something strange, something wrong in a way I couldn't quite articulate. Because if I said something, they'd say it was nonsense, that grief makes us see things that aren't there. And maybe it was. Maybe I was already heavy-headed from the day, from the weight of being the only person who cared enough to show up. But then I approached to look properly. He was turned, not on his back like his customary, like every other body I'd ever seen at a wake. He was on his side, as if making space, as if accommodating someone. You know when you sleep with someone and turn on your side to fit better in bed, to make room for another body? It was that. head resting crooked, arm half hidden, body curled to the corner, like he was the big spoon waiting for the little spoon to nestle against him. That froze me solid. I stood there for a few seconds, with that sensation of invading something intimate, witnessing something I shouldn't see, some private arrangement made in death that the living weren't meant to understand. But nobody else noticed, at least not at that moment. Night descended slowly. Movement grew sparse. It got to be around 10, 11 at night. Only me left, the employee who stayed there by protocol, and Donna Ginilda, who was from another building but knew him from the days of the street market, back when he still went out, still participated in the world. She dozed in a chair in the corner. The employee went to the back of the reception area, and I stayed there with my eyes glued to that casket, and with the sensation that it wasn't supposed to be that way, that someone had made a mistake that mattered more than anyone realized. And then it happened. First was a noise in the ceiling, as if the air conditioning was failing, that grinding sound of machinery about to give up. Then the light blinked. Not strong, just a brief darkening, and it came back. And then Donna Ginilda lifted her head, looked at me, and said softly, quietly, as if sharing a secret she wasn't sure she should tell, "Are you hearing that? Seems like there's one more in there. Do you remember the last time you witnessed something impossible and had to choose between your sanity and your senses? Between what you knew couldn't be true and what your body insisted was happening right in front of you? We think about how we dismiss the inexplicable to protect ourselves, how we'd rather doubt our own perception than accept that reality might be stranger and more terrible than we've allowed ourselves to believe." I let out an uncomfortable laugh, that nervous sound we make when we're trying to convince ourselves everything's normal. She just smiled and closed her eyes again, like someone who regretted having said it, who wished she could take the words back. But I couldn't laugh anymore, couldn't pretend, because seconds later I heard it too. It was very low, almost confused with the sound of the air conditioner or my own thoughts trying to rationalize what couldn't be rationalized. A breath. It wasn't from Edma, obviously. That was impossible. But it was different from any noise I'd ever heard in a place like this. Different in a way that made my scalp prickle and my hands go cold. It was as if it came from the depths. A calm rhythm. Paused. Very paused, but continuous. The patient breathing of someone who has all the time in the world. With each step I took toward the casket, the sound faded, moved away, returned as if trying not to be noticed, playing hide and seek with my perception. Then I started sweating. It wasn't fear yet. Couldn't call it that. It was physical discomfort. As if I'd been pulled to a place where my body didn't fit, where the laws that governed my existence didn't quite apply. The room was cold, but my neck sweated. Drops ran down my spine. I sat, waited, kept listening with every nerve stretched tight. The employee went out to smoke, the old woman slept, and the sound returned. But this time, it wasn't breathing anymore. It was as if something inside the casket moved very slowly. A muffled crack, something pulling fabric, dragging what was under the lining, rearranging itself in that confined space. I went over there slowly, got close, looked again. He was still turned, the same peaceful face, but something in the padding seemed different. On the opposite side from where he was leaning, the upholstery was sunken, as if it had weight, as if someone had laid there before and left a mark, the impression of a body that should not exist. But the space was empty. Still, I don't know what came over me, what possessed me to do what I did next. My hand went by itself, moved without permission from my conscious mind. I touched the lid and lifted it very slowly. I don't even know why I did that, what I thought I'd find or prove. Inside, I saw Edmure's body the same way, quiet, skin more opaque, but there, still recognizably him. But on the opposite side, where the padding was sunken, You could see that the bottom material had cracked, as if something had pressed hard, but without tearing through, without quite breaking the surface. And there was a smell, not of wilted flowers, not of chemical products. It was like a warm smell, organic, like a closed room after rain, like something living in a place meant only for the dead. Then I leaned my ear close and I heard it clearly, unmistakably. It wasn't breathing anymore. It was the sound of someone's mouth, chewing slowly, at long intervals, like someone eating something soft, calmly, in the dark, taking their time with a meal that would never end. I closed the lid at once, felt the sound vibrate in my arm, took 2 steps back, my leg locked up. I had no way to explain that and nobody to confirm it, nobody who would believe me without thinking I'd lost my mind. I went back to the bench, sat and stayed there until the sun started brightening through the dirty glass window at the entrance. Waited for daylight like it could save me from what I'd witnessed. The next day, the burial was quick. Only the gravedigger, me, and the funeral home employee were there, 3 people to send off a man who'd lived among hundreds. The man who took care of the final verification opened the lid and said, surprised, this was meant for 2. Edmure was in the middle, stretched out, as if he'd been rearranged during the night, moved from his sideways position to something more conventional. The upholstery was smooth, clean, without any depression, as if the night had erased all evidence. But his face, before he'd been serene, but now the corners of his mouth had marks, as if something had scratched from inside, had tried to get out or get in. There was a thin red scratch that went from cheek to near the nose, fresh enough to seem impossible. The gravedigger closed it, as if he hadn't seen anything, as if noticing would make him complicit in something he didn't want to acknowledge. I stayed quiet, kept my observations to myself. Today, every time I lie down to sleep, I remember that sideways position, that leftover space, that impression in the padding where no body lay. And I keep thinking if he slept alone his whole life, lonely in that 3rd floor apartment with no visitors and no family. Because there, on that last night, it seems like finally someone lay down with him or inside him. Share your experience in the comments beginning with, I feel that. Because when we encounter the inexplicable, we need to know we're not alone in our witnessing, that others have seen what can't be seen and survived the seeing. The first thing I saw was the fingernail. It wasn't even something I should have noticed first. So many things there to hurt before that. The dark casket, the cloth covering the face, the cold inside the room, the flowers already wilting. But what stuck in my head was the fingernail. It was too clean, polished in a way that erased him. Luciano always had dirty hands, even after washing, even wearing gloves when he remembered. It was grease, dust, screw marks, motor cable residue. His nails told the story of the week, sometimes the month, documented his labor in a way no timesheet ever could. And there they were, smooth, cut too short, wrong in a fundamental way. At that moment, I said in a low voice, but I said it. This isn't him. My youngest son looked at me, put his hand on my shoulder, as if wanting to hold me to the ground, keep me from floating away on my grief. I stayed standing, anchored by certainty rather than sorrow. It wasn't sadness I was feeling. It was a type of restlessness, a cold thing that starts in the middle of your chest and spreads until your hand begins to tremble, until your whole body vibrates with wrongness. They said the body was his. The bus fell from an embankment. There was fire, confusion, chaos that left few things intact. Of those who were inside, almost nobody was left recognizable, just burned meat and shattered bones. The funeral home said they only identified Luciano because of the ring, the scar on the eyebrow, and the documents that were in his bag, the paper evidence that survives when flesh doesn't. But I lived with this man for 21 years, slept with him more than 7,000 nights. I know the smell he had on his neck after showering, that particular combination of soap and skin that was his alone. I know the sound he made in his throat before coughing, that little clearing that announced he was about to speak. I know the birthmark he had on his rib, small and dark like a coffee stain. I even know when he was lying, because the corner of his eye would wrinkle, a tell he never knew he had. And I know when he's there and when he's not, can sense his presence or absence like I can sense weather changes in my joints. The scar was on the wrong side, flipped like a mirror image. The ring wasn't ours. It was similar, close enough to fool someone who hadn't worn the matching one for 21 years. But on ours, there's an inscription inside, a word spelled wrong. An error made on the wedding day by a jeweler who'd had too much to drink. We never had it fixed. It was our secret, our private joke. And the face, well, you could see it had been worked on, reconstructed, swollen, too swollen, as if they'd gone over it once, come back and gone over it again, trying to force resemblance where none existed. But even so, it wasn't him. I spoke with the funeral home people, a young man, nervous, who tried to smile while talking, that professional sympathy that never quite reaches the eyes. He said I could be in denial, that this was common, that pain makes us confuse things, makes us see what we want to see or refuse to see what's in front of us. But I wasn't confused. I was seeing. I was seeing what nobody wanted to see, the truth that was inconvenient for everyone but me. Deep down, I think even the young man knew, because he stopped arguing, just let his professional reassurances trail off into uncomfortable silence. He only asked if I wanted to spend some time alone in the room, and I did. They closed the door, left just me and him, or whoever him was. The light trembled, one of those cheap fluorescent tubes that buzz constantly. The flower in the corner of the room had fallen petals scattered on the floor, like tiny corpses. The cloth covering the sides of the casket was wrinkled, careless. I approached slowly, looked again, didn't recognize, but spoke anyway. Spoke as if he were Luciano, and spoke as if he were listening from wherever the dead go. Said that if it was him, to forgive me for doubting, for thinking it wasn't, that maybe my head had gone along with my heart, broken in the same accident. But if it wasn't him, to give me a sign, some proof that my instincts weren't betraying me. Who would you be if you had to choose between accepting a comfortable lie and pursuing an impossible truth, if the person you loved most came back, but came back wrong? I took a paper from my blouse pocket, wrote on it something only Luciano and I knew. Our first fight, the word he'd said that almost ended us before we began. The apology he'd whispered at 3 in the morning that saved everything. Folded it and placed it inside the jacket pocket. Nobody saw. Nobody ever knew about this. I left the room, signed what needed signing, and let it happen. Let them bury whoever that was. They buried him the next day. My feet didn't touch the ground right, like I was walking on a ship's deck in rough seas. I heard people talking, but it was like hearing underwater, muffled and distant. Everyone spoke low, that funeral whisper. The sound of the shovel hitting the earth was the only clear thing that day. Each impact, like a period, at the end of a sentence I didn't want to finish writing. I went home and left the door unlocked, some part of me hoping, waiting. Only locked the bedroom door. 3 days without sleeping, watching, listening. My son had a fever, vomited all night. The house seemed crooked, as if the floor had tilted to a side I couldn't see, some angle that existed outside normal geometry. And then someone knocked. It was early morning, almost 4. It was him at the door, standing with a thin face, sunken eyes, grown beard, a dry cut on his forehead, torn shirt. But it was him, or seemed like him. Said he woke up in the middle of the woods, that he'd been helped by a couple who saw a figure leaving the accident area, that he didn't remember exactly how he got out or why he ran. He just ran, found his way back. He hugged me. I went stiff. His arm was warm, his hand had grease under the nail like it should, but he was different in ways I couldn't quite name. Didn't ask about the kids, didn't look at the picture frame in the living room, didn't mention the motorcycle that was in the shop, didn't ask who came to the funeral. Just said he wanted a shower and sleep, like he'd been away on a business trip rather than dead for 3 days. In the bathroom, I noticed he took too long. When he came out, I asked what color our blanket was last winter, a test he should have passed easily. He smiled, said it was red, but it was green, deep green like forest moss. I let him sleep next to me. Didn't call him by name, couldn't form the syllables. The next day, he sat at the table, had coffee the way he always did, spread butter on bread like he'd done 10,000 times. Even the way of scratching his chin seemed the same. But there was something out of place, something off by just enough to matter. 2 degrees, that's it. 2 degrees of difference, like a photo out of focus, like sound out of sync with video, close enough to fool you if you're not paying attention, but wrong enough to set off every alarm if you are. And the dog wouldn't come near him, just stayed in the hallway, watching with ears low, tail still, sometimes growling quietly as if not wanting to be heard, as if afraid of what might hear. On the 3rd night, I woke to a sound. Footsteps, 2 types, one light, shorter, and another as if someone wore shoes too big, dragging at the toe, shuffling along. I stayed lying down, paralyzed. Sweat stuck to the pillow, the window rattled with wind. But the sound continued, seemed like they were walking back and forth, as if 2 people occupied the same body and took turns living, time sharing the meat. I didn't tell anyone about this. Not my mother, not the pastor, not my son. To this day he lives here, works, talks, responds. Sometimes forgets the neighbor's name, sometimes confuses the game schedule, small lapses that could be normal or could be proof of replacement. Sometimes he sits on the sofa and spends 10 minutes staring at the wall, as if waiting for it to open, reveal a door back to wherever he came from. But I don't ask questions anymore. I stored the green blanket in the back of the closet like evidence, changed the bedroom lock all the doors even during the day, keep barriers between rooms like they're borders between countries. There are days he looks at me like before, and I can almost believe nothing happened, that my grief invented impossibilities. But there are days it seems like he's seeing through me, looking at something behind me that I can't see, that I'm afraid to turn and face. And on those days, I keep thinking, maybe I buried a stranger in Luciano's grave, let someone else's husband rest under his name. But now I live with another stranger, and that's harder to accept, because if he's not Luciano and the other one wasn't either, then at what moment exactly did Luciano cease to exist? When did the man I loved slip away? And who noticed him go? Write in the comments something that begins with, I illuminate. Because even in the darkest stories, we must find the light we carry, must name the small flames that keep us from drowning in the darkness that presses close.